Okay, so let me just send you to the chat. Just a second.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Great.
So, Gautam, I was thinking that since Suchetana said that there may be some need of some sort of an introductory statement, would you like to give like a basic sort of introductory opening statement? Then I can start with that and then move on to the questions.
I'd be much happier if Somak did it. So we started off with the basic introduction. I can say a few words, but I mean, let him go first, and maybe Bindu and I can go right to the end.
You want me to do it?
In terms of
yeah, can you start? Then we can all say 2 minutes worth or 3 minutes worth of.
You're the expert on COVID, Gautam.
Yes. Gautam should talk about,
but not the sociology of physics.
Yeah.
But not the sociology of physics.
Yeah, complex systems, that's for sure.
whatever.
Okay.
So Shagnik again. So the session is live, and Tanvir actually sent the link in the chat box. So if you want to share that.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, great.
Problem is I can't cut and paste, but I just copied it. Yeah, it's come up.
So Ritaban sir, I think we can start now, and I can stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Just just give me 1 minute and we'll
Sure. Sure.
So if you stop sharing your screen, then I'll start sharing my screen, and then we'll
Right.
see.
Yeah.
So what I can do, and the vector. Yeah, I think this is good. And view.
Okay, so do you see my screen now, Shagnik?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Shagnik, should I start then? Shagnik?
Yeah, I think Ritaban, you can start because we are live on YouTube as well. I can see that.
Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone to this session of Precision 2020. This is, as you know, is a conference for the undergraduate students, by the undergraduate students, of the undergraduate students of Presidency and beyond. And this is the second day, and we are right now in this panel discussion on sociology of physics in the backdrop of COVID-19 lockdown. The panelists I'll introduce the panelists. My name is Ritaban Chatterjee. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Physics at Presidency University. And today I'll go alphabetically on the panelists. So the first one is Professor Bindu Bamba, who is a professor and former dean of the School of Physics at University of Hyderabad. Professor Bamba did her PhD at University of Chicago in 1983 and worked with Waichiro Nambu, who later went on to get the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2008. After, like all theoretical physicists, she spent some time at ICTP in Trieste, Italy, and then came back to India, and after positions at University of Madras and Punjab University, and also spending some time in CERN. She joined University of Hyderabad in 1991, where she has been ever since. Her area of expertise is theoretical physics, particularly theoretical high energy physics, mathematical physics, group theory, and so on. And in addition to physics, she has also published and taught on topics related to women in physical sciences, as well as scientific methodology and scientific temper in schools. And she has also, she's a resource person in sessions organized by the Discussion Forum for Online Teaching. So thank you, Professor Bamba, for joining this panel. And next up in the alphabetical order, we have Professor Gautam Menon. He is a professor of physics and biology at Ashoka University. Prior to joining Ashoka, he was a professor at the Institute of Mathematical Science in Chennai. He did his PhD from IISc Bangalore. And after postdoctoral stints at TIFR and Simon Fraser University in Canada, he joined IMSc in 1998. His original expertise is in the so-called soft condensed matter physics. However, in the last decade, he has mostly sort of refocused his attention in application of condensed matter physics in biophysics related problems. And in that regard, modeling of infectious disease and its implication for public policy is a very strong interest of Professor Menon's. And he, as we know, in the last 6 months during the pandemic and lockdown, he has given numerous interviews and talks on the science and scientific policies regarding COVID-19, not only in academic institutions, but also in national and international media. Thank you, Professor Menon, for joining, for accepting our invitation to join this panel. And then last but not the least is our very own Professor Somak Raychaudhury, who is the director of IUCA. Prior to joining IUCA, he was the head of the Department of Physics and Dean of Natural and Mathematical Sciences at Presidency during 2012-2015. Professor Raychaudhury did his PhD at Cambridge University working with Donald Lindelbell. And he did postdoc at Center for Astrophysics at Harvard University, and also held positions at IUCA and University of Birmingham before coming back to India in 2012. His expertise is in the properties of galaxy groups and clusters and their X-ray and radio observations and their interaction with the central supermassive black holes. And in the last few months, he and his team at IUCA of scientists, they have consulted with the Pune Municipal Corporation in their decisions on strategies of testing and measures to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, thank you, Professor Raychaudhury, for taking time of your busy schedule to join this panel.
Thank you.
Okay, so after the introduction, let's move on to the discussion. And I have a set of questions in mind that I would like you to discuss, but any other question that comes to you that is important to you, or also from the audience will be discussed. My plan is to continue the primary discussion for an hour or so, and then open the floor for discussions, questions from the audience. So the audience may write questions in the chat box if they want, and we'll then read those at the end of the primary end of the first hour. But before we move on to the question, I would invite all of you to sort of make a introductory statement on the current situation and the topic of this panel. So let's start with, I was planning to go, let's start, so since I introduced in the alphabetical order, let's go the reverse alphabetical, and let's start with Professor Raychaudhury for introductory statements.
Well, thank you, Ritaban. I think, well, we will cover a huge canvas today if we go by the kinds of things that you've set out for the discussion today. But let me say, of course, we've chosen a focus of physics and how our research and teaching may be affected by this shutdown and pandemic and everything. And but I think that the questions that we are going to talk about today are pretty universal. It is to do with education as a whole and education at all levels. And this particular incident came upon us without much notice. It changed our lives forever, I hope. And we are still coping with the short-term and long-term implications of how to cope with it. And I hope we cover some of the aspects that we are going through. I think one of the things that I want to emphasize in this topic is that the lockdown has affected people in so many different ways. It's affected people of various economic backgrounds in sometimes devastating ways, and sometimes it's actually posed amazing problems that we'd never thought about before, and it's brought out the best in innovativeness in a lot of people. But in education, I think, as I think we will agree at the end of this, I hope, that there are some things that have come up out of it which probably wouldn't have come out. There are some positive aspects of it, and I hope we cultivate on those positive aspects. And they've certainly brought out some really challenging aspects, both to do with the education part of physics, the research part of physics, and more importantly, the sociology that connects the two. And so this is, I'm very happy to be part of this panel, and also very happy that Presision is going so well. This is something that came out of this favorite department of mine, which I've been very happy to be associated with for 8 years now. I actually officially resigned from the department only 3 days ago, and of course I'm very proud that Presidency Physics actually has been carrying on this particular event for so many years with so much success. And here too, we now meet on cyberspace, and this might be one of the great ways in which this particular activity can be embellished beyond what it has so far. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So Presision is going on from 2017, and I think all credit goes to the students who have been very persistent on carrying this out every year with very little guidance and help from any of the faculty members. Okay, so next up in the reverse alphabetical order is Professor Golda Menon with introductory statements, please.
Thank you, Ritaban, for this invitation. Let me thank this wonderful panel that I'm on. I think it's particularly nice, echoing what Somak said, that you have an undergraduate conference in physics for undergraduates run by undergraduates. This is very unusual. And it's really very special to see that the titles of the talk look completely like titles that you might see in any regular scientific thing. So this is something that makes me very happy both as a scientist and as a teacher, that you have this orientation towards science and towards research. As Somak pointed out, and as Bindu will point out again, our lives have transformed in a way that we would have been completely unaware of in December or even January of this year, December of last year or January of this year. And as she said, this has taught us many things. It sort of emphasized aspects of resilience in our society, also internationally. I mean, we have done things that we didn't think that we were capable of. To actually do things like have a 10,000 bed hospital set up within the space of about 10 days to 2 weeks. These are things that we didn't assume that Indians would do fast, well, naturally. There have been failures, but there have been successes. Another success that I would like to point out is how the Indian scientific community, as a whole, responded to these really unusual perturbations and changes. That the group I belong to, the Indian Scientists Response to COVID-19, is a group of about somewhere between 600 and 700 scientists, visual artists, teachers, doctors, psychologists, etc., and based over institutions all over the country. And it's not as though any of us were really into thinking about infectious diseases, but when confronted with COVID-19 and the large changes in the society, the fact that a group like this could come together, create information that could be disseminated to the public, new types of teaching methods, explaining to the public things about superstitions, why they were incorrect, what might be the trajectory, have a modeling group that thought about COVID data. All of that, a combination of physics, maths, chemistry, all sorts of areas that you could think of, talking to people very far separated from what we did. I think that is a change that I hope lasts. I mean, this ability to understand that life is really made up of many different streams. You're not just a physicist. You're a part of society. You have to talk to people who are not physicists, not even scientists. You have to be able to convince them of certain actions and the importance of these in the larger context of society. This is a positive. There are negatives, as we will discuss here. I mean, certainly the impact on teaching and the fact that all of us have transitioned into teaching into a screen pretty much all of the time nowadays whenever I'm in front of a class. This has certainly changed. It's not clear what the effect of that will be long term. How do the students feel about it? This is something I'd like to listen and maybe it'll come up in the questions. But these are all, I mean, as I said, this is a very nice panel discussion to have at this point when we now have some experience of what's happened in the last several months. We're in a better position to understand what we should do going on. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Professor Menon, again for sort of introducing the topics that we should discuss and elaborate on as we progress through this panel discussion. So now, Professor Bamba, please give some introductory statement about how you are sort of looking and thinking about the current situation.
Well, first of all, let me thank you so much for inviting me to Presidency College, even if it's online. Because being a physics student at the University of Chicago, I grew up in the shadow of Presidency College. It was supposed to be the groves of academe. You are the Greeks of India, Presidency College. So I am very honored to be in your midst, and I'm very honored to be in the midst of future Presidency College graduates too. So thank you very much for inviting me. Sort of a dream come true, even though online. So that's one positive effect of the the pandemic for me, is to be invited on this panel. But really, when the pandemic came and Gautam started posting all these gloomy things on Facebook, I went through the 5 stages of grief. I was always arguing, and it was denial first, that you can't be right. It can't be so terrible, but then after that, it was anger, why are we in the middle of all this? Then there was a lot of bargaining. And that also with Gautam and others, how much time it'll go away, etc. So there was the bargaining, and then there was the depression that it's just not going away. And now I think I've reached the point of acceptance, and okay, it's here and let's deal with it in a positive way. So there's been a sociological advancement of my feelings toward in this pandemic too. And I noticed when this topic was announced, somebody said there is no sociologist in the panel. Well, the thing is that we physicists sometimes think that we know everything. And there was a time when major sociologists of the world thought that there could be a physics of sociology also, that there was logical positivism and that human behavior could be predicted, but it all overturned. And it all overturned, in fact, with the Chicago School of Sociology, which said that in large masses, you can never predict human behavior, the herd behavior, which of course another thing that Gautam knows all about. And is that when there is this herd behavior, or the human behavior on a whole is not a sum of its individual parts. So it is this collective behavior of human beings that is going to determine how we deal with this pandemic, and how we deal with the solution to this pandemic. So I'm hoping that we come up with some good ideas in our collective wisdom in this forum. So thank you very much for inviting.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bamba. So for those of you who may have joined a little late, and just in general, I would do one-line summary of the introductory statement. So Professor Somak Raychaudhury said that, although this situation is not good for anyone, we should look for positives, things that we wouldn't have done, the progresses that wouldn't have been made in the absence of this pandemic situation. We should look for things like that. Professor Menon said that some of those have already happened. We have witnessed, 10,000 bed hospitals to be built in a week or in a month, or scientists have actually sort of produced content to spread awareness against superstition, or awareness about how this can be prevented, the spread of the disease can be prevented, and so on. And physicists are usually blamed for not coming up with things that are immediately useful to the society. So a lot of things have happened in that direction. And Professor Bamba said said a very humane thing, where we all in March, none of us really believed that this. Am I still audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So none of us really believed that this will go on for so long, and this will be so, it will affect everyone, and will be so sort of overwhelming to all of us. But then we all sort of came to realize that that is the reality, and then we sort of tried to think of, how can we help, or what can be done, think of various solutions. And also she said that maybe this panel will also provide some answers to some of the questions that many of us had, and some of the problems that the whole physicist community are facing. Okay, so maybe my share screen is that Shagnik, are you there?
Is the share screen needed? I mean, you can.
Yeah.
Share screen is not really needed. I'll just flash the questions once, and then I'll again unshare the screen so that all the participants sort of at least have a look at the questions once.
Sure.
So, okay, so can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are roughly the questions that I had in mind, but as I said, that more and more can be added, or some of these may not be as important as the others, and so on. So so with that in mind, we will start the discussion, and I think I'll again go in the alphabetical order. The first question that I think a big fraction of educators and students and education administrators are thinking right now. I'll start with that question. And and then we can move on. And I'll start with Professor Bamba with that question. And then what we'll do is Professor Bamba can share her thoughts on this question, and then the other two panelists can also sort of add to that. So the question that I think, if I had just one question for this panel, this is the question that we'll ask. And the question is, unless we can ensure that all or at least most of the students have access to online facilities, including internet connection as well as some gadget with a screen, should there be online teaching? That's the question. So Professor Bamba, could you please start with
since I come from, of the three people on the panel, I come from the poorest university, even though it is a central university. So I have a large spectrum of students from different backgrounds. And in particular, I have a lot of students from rural Odisha, which suffers from lack of broadband. So it has become an ethical issue, and there have been matters of equity and diversity, because students had to rapidly and in an unplanned fashion, they had to evacuate the hostels and go back into their villages. And the women students, particularly, as soon as they went back home, were assigned household duties because there were no maid servants coming in and all sorts of things. So their education really, their education became a secondary matter to the male members of the house. So there was that gender non-equity in their online education. And also there was the question of sharing the broadband with others, and so what my student told me is, in the beginning, it was very difficult for him in the village. And whenever he talked to me, I could hear cows in the background and things like that. But then he said that because all the school children had to go online, that the people of the village got together and insisted that the tower be fixed, the internet tower be fixed. And the internet tower was fixed. That was not functioning for many years. The Geo people and the Airtel people came and fixed the tower, and BSNL came and fixed the tower, because it was their children now who were suffering. Even their children had to go on classes online. So in some ways, although there are these ethical issues of, for example, surveillance, consent, identity, confidentiality, equity, diversity, all of these are under the realms of ethics of online education. But the thing is that when push came to shove, this is what happened, and it is the women who are really suffering, both the teachers as well as the students who are women, because the teachers say that now they are home, so they have to take care of their household duty. Automatically, they are being pushed back to their original gender roles as the caregivers, the food providers, the child, this thing, because there are no maid servants or there are no caretakers, etc. at home. So they're pushed into this to their traditional roles again, and so it's sort of conflicting with their professional roles. So in that sense, online teaching has become not gender equitable. But on the other hand, what is happening in some of my classes is that because of the anonymity that you cannot, most of them put off their screens. So the girls feel that they can ask questions a lot more, because there's no aggressive intervention of, in class, it's always the male students who seem to dominate the discussions, but not online. Online, I'm finding that I'm having a lot more of gender parity in discussion. So that's a good thing. So the bad thing is that it is shoving people back into their traditional roles and all sorts of gender advancements that we have made is being sort of pushed back in this. But the advantageous thing is, because children are being affected and parents are very concerned about their children, there is this collective effort to improve the improve the means of communication. And even teachers are giving their, we are using our contingency money to give internet connections to our less economically well-off students. And so I have given a connection, a geo connection and a dongle to my student. I've given an extra PC that I had at home to one of my students, etc. So in some ways, sort of the goodness in us is also coming out because of this, the fact that we have such a lot of inequity in this form of teaching.
Okay.
So I can just now hand it on to.
Yeah, Professor Menon, your comments.
I think Bindu made a very good point. These are sort of larger issues of equity. It's not just academic equity in the sense of academics, but we're also interrogating larger societal issues and societal divisions. And as usual, the burden falls on women more than it does on men. That's certainly something to be concerned about. At Ashoka, we face exactly the same questions that Bindu mentioned. We have students from all over the country, 28 states of the country, and with a fair range of socioeconomic circumstances. So I think one thing that we've tried to do is try to ensure that students are not disadvantaged by being in remote locations, bad internet, no devices. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think some students are allowed to return to campus if they can say or demonstrate that there is no way they can access teaching from outside. As long as the numbers on campus are kept very small, that's still a feasible object. You don't have all students returning at the same time. That's certainly one thing that we've done. Being online gives you some advantages in some specific ways. What colleagues of mine do is that they record very short little videos, which you can listen to asynchronously. So you can teach little pieces of electricity and magnetism, little pieces of statistical physics, upload them, and then have students look at them whenever they want to. And then the class meeting is only to discuss questions that came out of that, do a problem solving session, etc. But students can look at the material rather than a linear class where you have to be there or you miss all of it, which in a sense is, I think, a positive overall in terms of the way we teach. So we're also learning, the students are also learning. I agree there are sort of really issues regarding access which are important for us and we still don't know how to solve it in any true sense.
Okay. So Professor Raychaudhury comments on this, and in general, I mean, just to add to what we are discussing also, Professor Menon pointed out that there are some advantages to online teaching as well. So your comments, please.
No, what I would like to do is to go back to your original question first. I mean, I completely agree with the other two speakers, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But about the thing is whether it's ethical or not. It's interesting that this whole thing was foisted upon us without notice. Suddenly, in fact, what happened here in Ayuka was that we were in the middle of a semester, about to start the second half of the semester. And then within 24 hours, we had to decide what to do, and whether the students had to go back home or stay here. We gave people the choice, and within 24 hours, people made the choice, and half of them made the wrong choice in retrospect and stuff like that. And then we gave ourselves 7 days to figure out how to do it. And I noticed the transition from the puritanical and the conservative colleagues that I have, who started by saying, there's no way I can do this online. No. I mean, I have to write on the blackboard. And then within 7 days, the same person had bought a tab and was writing things and had done the jugaad of doing it, right? Now, I want to point out that this is by no means a novel idea. Distance learning has been with us for a long time. In the UK, or the Open University has been teaching distance learning since the 70s. In Australia, in big countries, distance learning has happened. IIT coaching was on distance learning, the Agarwal classes and whatever, for a long time before they became these big things. So there are models out there of distance learning that does not necessarily have to involve videos and live interactions and stuff like that. It's only because it was foisted upon us so fast that we had to go into a mode where we didn't think much. In fact, if you see what Zoom was like, or these platforms were like in March and what it is now, you would see how rapidly this whole thing has evolved. And if it could evolve this way, you could question why didn't it evolve in before like this. So clearly there are certain things that have evolved, and when things evolve chaotically, they don't evolve necessarily in the right direction. And so now you would find maybe in 2-3 years time, looking back, this whole thing would have attained some kind of a viral equilibrium, and then you would think that now we have the optimum situation. There are certain things that we can take from the distance learning models of the open universities and stuff like that, which did quite well. And one of the things that already has been talked about, if you hear what the UGC has been saying and the Education Ministry has been saying, is that they are thinking in the long term of having, if people really have to stay at home in various places and these materials have to be delivered, to have local tutors who would help the villages, the students in the villages with the stuff, and not depend on this online stuff. So the offline stuff would be there, and local tutors. And this is exactly the open university model, and that kind of stuff. So people have been talking about this. You can look at villages having these big loudspeakers for school students, where the students sit in front of their houses, and in classes being going on in loudspeakers, socially distanced and stuff like that. People have come up with wonderful innovations. And I don't know how long we'll have to carry on with this. But if, for example, and Gautam can tell us about how cyclical this pandemic is supposed to be, but there might be episodes that will come where we will have to distance ourselves even after we come back and go back, etc. So it is interesting that our innovation is being stretched to a point where we're coming up with these very interesting ideas. And of course, we will miss, and we'll talk about the practicalities of doing various kinds of science and arts and discussion. I mean, I've been talking to my colleagues who are professors of literature and economics and social sciences, and their problems are quite different, and interestingly different from the people who do lab-based sciences and things like that. We'll have to come up with ideas, and we'll discuss all that. But I think there are various elements that we have already imbibed in which such things can be done. And just the last point that you mentioned, Ritaban, in this ethical issue, I mean, I can already see around me many universities coming up with interesting solutions. Jadavpur University, for example, has done a survey about who has tabs and who has smartphones, and has actually given people these. I mean, they've given out thousands of these instruments to people so that they can go and do such stuff from home. So some institutions can afford to do this, and maybe that is one way you can go. I'm sure most schools won't be able to do that. So I think everybody has come up with situations like this. So asynchronous teaching was also there before. That was a technique that was experimented with. I have a colleague, Prashanjit Shah, who you've met several times at the University of Zurich. For many years, I think 5 years, he's been giving asynchronous seminars where you call him for a colloquium, he would record his colloquium, send it to you, and ask everybody to watch it, and then he would appear and answer questions only. And I thought that was a fantastic way of doing it. And so this is exactly what we're doing now. ICER is teaching in the same way as Gautam said, in all the ICERs are teaching, for example, exactly this way, where, and the IITs, some of the IITs have started, where they've recorded parts of the lectures and given it to people so that people can study these. So I think it's challenging. It's challenging in a different way for school students than for college students, challenging in a different way for humanities students and sciences students. But every stream is going to bring up, I think, their preferred method. It's just this painful few months that we are going to go through, which is going to be difficult.
Okay, I want to do a yes and no question right now, and then move on to, move on to some discussion about research, since you mentioned experimental research versus other kinds of research. So the yes and no question is to bring a closure to the discussion that we are doing right now, and the participants can also give yes and no answers in the chat box. I'd like to see the statistics. So the question is the following. I mean, you know, as all of you mentioned that, yes, there are some problems, but there are lots of innovations happening and things are becoming better. People are stretching their own imagination to make it better and so on. And that is all right. What I see around me is for small kids, it's almost impossible to do online teaching in the sense that they are sitting in front of a screen, but then they are saying, ma'am, 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 but no one is really hearing them. And they feel very frustrated and they don't have the maturity to understand that the things, things are different. On the other hand, if you are in a campus or, IIT, for example, what they're doing is they're saying, we'll do online teaching. But if a group of students think that they don't have the infrastructure to attend online classes, then they can come and live on the campus. In general, they're not allowing students to live on the campus, but a small number of students can. So that way they are sort of erasing the difference between available facilities. In between, there are these senior school students and these undergraduate college students who are not in a campus. For them, so my yes and no question is for them. And the question is the following. Let's say you have 100 students in a class. 50 of them have very good infrastructure. They have no problem attending online classes. 40 of them don't have very good facility, but they have some facility. They have a small smartphone. They can barely do some internet and they can maybe attend the classes. Maybe not ask the questions, but attend the classes. And then there are 10 students who really don't have any internet facility. What they can do is they maybe once in a day or once in 3 days, they can go and download somehow the videos, the Zoom sessions that have been recorded. They can download those and they can use them for their study. So this is the 50, 40, 10 divide of a class that you are teaching. So give me an yes and no answer, whether you would teach it or you would wait.
I would teach it
Okay.
because I am familiar with Google Classrooms and all that it can do.
Okay.
And Google Classroom can take care of the 50, the 40, and the 10.
Okay.
It is a very good platform. And so I would do it.
Okay. And Professor Menon?
Yeah, I would teach it to. I mean, these are questions that don't have simple yes and no answer. We sort of post it like that, but life is complicated, and we all have to do the best that we can, what we think are in the best interests of some people. Hope that students who are unfortunate and don't have will somehow manage to do it, and we can help them to do it in whatever way we can. So we have to make the best of a situation that is bad from many points of view. The only one sort of half sentence I want to add to what Somak said is that we actually don't know how this is going to play out over the next 2 or 3 years. Something that strikes us as very iniquitous right now may hold the seeds of something that has a larger equity for society in another year or two. We don't know where it's going.
No, yeah.
Okay. And Professor Raychaudhury?
Well, yes, absolutely, yes. I mean, I'm teaching it and I will teach it. I mean, what choice do I have? I don't think you can postpone such things. And we just, as I said, we'll have to find ways of dealing with every part of we have to be flexible and compassionate. That's the main thing. Now, having said that, if that's the last thing that you wanted to hear from me, you said it's a yes or no. I have one comment to make.
Okay.
The main problem I feel of these courses that are being done now is the assessment part, right? It's how to do the exams. And the exams are not easy. I mean, even when we are doing interviews, we know that there are ways of, there's no guarantee that the person you're asking a question to is not Googling at the same time. They don't have their exam books open, etc., etc. So our exams and assessment has to evolve. And I don't feel that we have a good way of doing assessment yet for many subjects, and so that is the problem. And the problem is, if assessment is not a problem, if you can do a course where assessment doesn't play an important role, fine. But that is otherwise delivering the lecture in various forms, and as Bindu said, you can put it on Google Classroom, put it on various places. People can offline asynchronously catch up with things given we can put checks and balances in the system. If that is an end in itself, I think it can be done.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. Bindu has something to say.
I have something to say about assessment, actually.
Okay.
Of late, I've become an expert on online assessment through various things that I've been trying to do. So, there is, we have been experimenting both with Moodle and Google Forms. And Google Forms allows you to make these quizzes, including, in astrophysics. We've done one in astrophysics also. Make these quizzes and go around. It shuffles the questions and goes to goes immediately to the student, and the student has its multiple choice about 10 to 15 minutes to send it back. So most students don't have that much dexterity that they can Google and answer the questions within 10 to 15 minutes. And it has actually worked quite well.
Yeah.
And, and those students who had some problems with connection and all, we have made alternate arrangements for them to be tested. That is, we can have a one-to-one, oral examination where we connect. We can do it on WhatsApp call. Yeah. And have an oral examination of some sort if they cannot connect. But most of them have been able to do it and submit to me the quiz, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow in that deep part, how to do it. I'll demonstrate it online, yes, how to do it. And it has seemed to work, and it seemed to work in Introduction to Particle Physics, which is not very easy to test, but it seems to have worked there. But of course, it will not test the calculational skills of the person. It will basically test it's multiple choice questions. So it will not really be able to test the real computational skills of the person, but it's something. It is something. But we have to come up, and I think a lot of experimentation in this field, especially being done. And I'm a member of another group in which experiments are done by the research scholar going into the lab, collecting data, and then it is dispersed to all the students, and the students analyze the data and send it back.
Yes.
So that they, is some way, but they don't have, they don't touch the instruments, which is what they should do and make the experiment. But at least the analysis part they can do. Some research scholar, he's already there in the lab, and a couple of them, they take the data from the machine and send it to them. So that's another way. So every Sunday we are meeting and trying to devise new ways of testing.
Okay. So I think we have to move on.
Has her hand up.
So Suchetana, yes. So Suchetana, you have a comment. Can you, if you have a quick comment, you can make now, or?
Yeah, I guess I had a comment, but I think we will keep it up to the open session, because I'm sure some others will also have comments on that. So I would keep it for the open session later. Thank you.
So we have to move on to a slightly different topic now. And actually, I'll start with Professor Bamba, because she is the real salt of the earth theorist,
No, actually, these days I'm doing Fermilab experiments on neutrinos. So I'm not salt of the earth theorist. I have taken shifts sitting just now where I'm sitting. I have taken Fermilab night shifts for 12 hours, monitoring all the detectors from Minnesota to Chicago, and watching all those neutrinos come in and leave showers. And each and every shower of the 10,000 showers I monitored are on my screen.
Another positive effect of the pandemic.
Exactly.
So I've actually been doing experimental work.
But I'll start with you, but others can comment as well. So the question is, would you say that theoretical physics and also maybe computational physics research has been more or less unaffected by the pandemic?
I would say, except for the psychological impact of the pandemic, which has been really really a lot. You know, I also felt it a lot, and all my collaborators felt it a lot. Yeah, I would say that we do not have the same difficulties as the experimentalists do, but we still have the same mental stress
Right.
that the experimentalists have. And nobody talks about mental stress. They seem to think that, you know, that like Newton, you know, we will, it's the pandemic, so we will come up with this, you know, we will come up with these beautiful theories just like Newton did, or we'll come up with some magnum opus like Shakespeare did, because, you know, these pandemics, all you're doing is sitting at home and thinking, and so you will think big thoughts and it will happen. But we also have to do housework, and we also have to do art, you know, that time, you know, that 2 or 3 hours in the office that you sit and think, and then you go next door, knock on your colleague and say, you know, I have this idea, can I discuss it with you? Jot it on the board. Those type of things which are essential to a theorist, those are now missing. So I would say that we are not as badly affected as the experimentalists, but we are affected. Computationally, I think it's all right. But having new ideas, and, you know, and discussions on the ideas, and you know, one-to-one interaction with students, and running out of the office with some new thought, and sipping a cup of coffee and discussing physics, from which new ideas emerge. All those things are now not with us. Instead, you know, we have to mop and cook and you know, sweep and all these things, and we get tired, and then we have to sit back and think of physics. You know, so it is not Newton. It is, we are not Newtons and we are not Shakespeare's, but we are better off than the experimentalists who can't go into that lab.
Right, right. So unless there are some specific comments on this particular one, I'll move on to the next question, because I think Professor Bamba has sort of summarized the points well. Is there anything?
One thing I want to say,
Okay,
I mean,
so, yeah.
I think Newton is a good analogy, because of course everybody by now knows that Newton, you know, did his work on gravitation and calculus, etc., binomial theorem, that kind of stuff during the pandemic period. But he was living with his aunt, and he was just sitting under apple trees and stuff like that, and and so we couldn't. But I mean, I think a very good point was brought up. The problem that I think we faced during this period, and that applies to everybody, not just us faculty, but also students, is that the work-life balance actually completely went for a toss. If you are working from home, not everybody, I mean, a lot of software people do work from home, but in general, we didn't quite get the hang of working from home and at home to separate out the various things, and our you know, sleep cycles, our work cycles all got mixed up. So that is one difficulty I think we did have. I felt that there are two things that were, I think, affected in my particular research and teaching environment, and one positively and one negatively. One positively was that I felt that my students and postdocs, I have interacted on a very, very regular basis, Zoom, WhatsApp, or whatever, far better during this period than I normally do. In a normal thing, you know, you wait for your students to turn up, and even, you know, there are various excuses, and sometimes they don't turn up, and then sometimes, you know, things get prioritized because there's a meeting, etc. Here, you're ruled by your calendar and your diary and your Zoom, whatever, and then things get organized in a much better way, at least in my life. And I felt that I could interact with my students. In fact, I think I've been, in terms of, you know, finishing papers and stuff like that, far more productive during this period than any other period. The thing that got affected was that large part of research, and this is what will happen if we have to think of a long term, as Gautam is saying, you know, implication of this is that a lot of the work is exploratory, where you go somewhere and you explore ideas, and then things happen, and those things we are straitjacketed now for that. I mean, I think it was okay to carry on with existing projects and projects that are very well defined, and particularly, you know, my PhD student finished during this period in a very organized fashion. But actually to find new collaborations and those things, we'll have to work out new ways of. I mean, I go to a place, I meet a bunch of people, and they say things, and then we look at their lab, and that kind of stuff is certainly put on hold. And I don't think we can deal with, in physics particularly, this kind of a lockdown for years and years and years, and have that kind of research evolve naturally. That's what I want to say.
So when I just had one sentence to sort of say
sure,
that,
sure.
you know, lovely points from both Bindu and Somak, but I think this goes back to the word in your title, sociology. And we should not forget that all scientists are, in a sense, social creatures. We need to talk to people. Even, you know, this image of a theorist who sits in his office and only calculates doesn't work in practice. Very small fraction of people actually do that. Exactly as Bindu said, you need to go to someone's office, knock on their door, write on their board. That's how communications happen. That's how, you know, collaborations happen. I think this is something that, exactly as Somak says, has been missing. We still don't know how to adjust for this yet. And that will certainly determine the trajectories of individual scientists and even scientists as a collective over the next few years.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that this, you know, knocking on the neighbor's door and talking about new ideas, that is still possible with Zoom. Yeah, I mean, we are not used to it. We don't like it. We like to knock on the door and have a, you know, go to the coffee machine and get the coffee together instead of getting my own coffee and my collaborator getting their own coffee. But that's at least something that's sort of in few months. If this goes on for a few more months, then we'd all at some point we'd probably, you know, get so used to it that we'd be fine with it. But yeah.
Ritaban, I'm told in Ayuka that the two most impactful events in Ayuka during the lockdown has been shutting down the coffee machine and shutting down the badminton court.
Mm-hmm.
This has completely affected our research life. And every day I'm reminded that I'm the culprit who did both.
But can I say one thing? Sorry, this is
Yes.
Bhavna. I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with all of you, but you know, meeting in person is always, you know, motivates you to another level, I must say. I mean, it's a different charm altogether. I mean, that is something we are missing.
Right. I mean, yes, that's true. We are also, I mean, as I said, that maybe there will be a point where we'll get more used to meeting someone virtually, but we are not there yet. But by the way, Shomakda, I was thinking that maybe at the end of the year, you could show that the total number of papers submitted by Ayuka people have increased this year, and then you can prove that the coffee machine and the badminton court was impactful in a different way.
You'll have to analyze the effect of caffeine on these papers.
That's a paper in itself.
That's a paper in itself, exactly.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next question, and this is I'll start with Professor Menon here. Professor Bamba has already touched this topic, so I'll start with Professor Menon. And that is, we have seen that overwhelmingly people who had to care for their family members. So, for example, who have old parents who need care, or who had little kids who need supervision, they have been very heavily affected by the lockdown because they cannot get any work done. They cannot sit in a Zoom meeting for hours and so on. Whereas people who don't have to care for anyone, they actually have more time in some cases. So please comment on that, and also maybe suggest something that's if you have any unique suggestions about this.
I mean, in a sense, that's a fundamental inequity that's operated even before the lockdown, right, and before these issues. I mean, double income, no kids families typically have more time and more disposable income than someone with 2 kids between the ages of 2 and 4. I think some of these difficulties are accentuated now because of the absence of people from outside to help you. For example, someone to look after the kids in the creche, someone to look after someone to come in and look after elderly parents, and part of that. So we wind up doing many more things that we would have normally outsourced to people who are close to us, to other people, but they're not in a position to do that anymore. But again, this is not peculiar to scientists. It's not peculiar to physicists. All of society, everybody faces this particular issue. And in a sense, this is something that, as I said, it's not special to this particular discussion. Everyone is trying to figure out ways to deal with it.
That's right. So any further comment on this, Professor Bamba?
Yes, I do, because I talked to a couple of my colleagues who have babies and and who have school-going children, some of whom are joining the discussion here also, and they found that the large part of the childcare fell upon them. When they went to the office, they could forget about these things and concentrate on their work. But what they said is that that society should now recognize that there should be some flexibility to women in their 30s who are looking flexibility of hours. Like, I mean, you could reschedule your class, the class that you're going to teach, to a time when your child is not when your child is sleeping or something like that. If there is that much flexibility of the timetable is there, that you can give the class from like 2 to 3 rather than give it at 9 to 10. You have to teach the class at 9 to 10. So you could look at you could try and accommodate the fact that the caregiver does not have the flexibility of hours that, for example, I have, or Gautam has, or Somak has, right? So we can teach the morning classes if they are there, and we can give try. We need not be so fixed and rigid in our mentality. And I find that in the university, some of the young people are so fixed and rigid about their views on these things, like things about not supporting childcare on campus. Maybe we'll now have to rethink about these things now that we have realized how important childcare is, and also, just about being more flexible in allowing caregivers to give their care and also to carry out their duties. So a sort of shift of mindset to be slightly less rigid. And when you say this, everybody tells you you're being unprofessional. What is unprofessional about this? I mean, it is going to bring efficiency to the workplace, so it is professional. But every time you mention babies or children or childcare, it just becomes unprofessional to a lot of guys, which is really very is disheartening, disheartening, because we have so many very brilliant women in the workplace who have whose potential can't be realized because of these various roles that have been thrust upon them.
Can I make one comment, Ritaban, just to sort of follow?
Sure.
And I mean, there is a fun, because your audience is a young audience. You're all undergraduates, and presumably most of them are not married yet. This is something fundamental that we should address, that both men and women should take equal responsibility for what goes on in the house. Traditionally, it has been the woman who has taken the brunt of this. In several of us sort of grew up in atmospheres where it was more equitably divided, but that's the direction to go. And the earlier that young people, especially men, realize it, the better it is for our society as a whole.
That's right.
Yeah, and another point is that the caregiver. I mean, of course, we have at Ayuka an excellent creche, an excellent child care facilities, but we had to close it down. And I saw how amazingly that affected people, not just the people who do online classes, but people who work in the labs and people who do other kinds of research. It's actually prevented a lot of people from doing their work, even within the restricted things that we could do. But there's another aspect to it, the other end of the spectrum. There are old people who we have to care for. I have to care for my mother, who's 85 and bedridden. And we have people who come in, there are nurses who look after her, but during the pandemic period, they couldn't. So during this period, we had to look at, and I'm not the only one in this campus, a lot of us have old parents who need looking after, and we did the whole work ourselves because we could not let people from the outside the campus come in and look after them. And that this is something we have to rationalize if we have to go through this periodically and over a long term, is how we function within this. There must be solutions, and there must be, again, based on compassion, based on flexible scheduling of things.
Okay, thank you. So we may come back to this later. I just had a small comment which I sort of realized while thinking about this and also listening to you. And that is, these problems with caregivers having trouble accommodating their schedule, accommodating their caregiving along with their schedule. That was there before the pandemic. And it has doubled down during the pandemic and it has been worse. But on the other hand, it has also made these things more mainstream. These problems that people are facing. I think before, as Professor Bamba said, that mention of this was not very common. Whereas I think with this explicit problems that people are having, I think has given sort of created a space where these are being discussed in a more direct way, and maybe that's one silver lining out of this these problems that we are facing. We'll see how that goes. So before I move on to the next question, I'll just like to say that in answer to that yes/no question, most of the students who replied said that yes, we should teach that class. One of them said that we should teach, but also parallelly we should try to give infrastructure to the other students, like Jadavpur University has proposed,
we are also.
which we are all trying. Someone has said that instead of live Zoom, we could have just recorded videos sent via email so that everyone has equal footing on the class, and then there may be one final session with discussion of questions and so on. And also another student, which I thought was what mentioning, has said that I definitely think the class should be taught because above everything, I would like to have some interaction with the teacher as opposed to just staying home, because it's not good to just study on my own. And one person, like, this is presidency undergraduate, so we have one clever answer. I don't agree with this answer, but this is really clever, so I'm mentioning it. So one person said that this survey is flawed because everyone here already has a good internet connection.
Selection effect, yes, of course.
Okay, so moving on to the next question that we had, and coming back to teaching again. So let's say if we have ideal infrastructure for everyone, even then, is online education the same as classroom education in the absence of direct interaction between students and teachers and each other? So I'll start with Professor Raychaudhury.
No, absolutely can't be. How can it be? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've always felt, and I've been a teacher, I know, for 30 years now almost. Going into a class is almost like a performance. It's like going on stage as an actor. And I've done quite a lot of acting myself as well. So I think it's a performance in the sense that an actor, a teacher shouldn't be called an actor, but it's the same sentiment, the feedback from the air, from whoever you're talking to, it plays a huge role. I mean, of course, there are teachers who come into the class and just face the blackboard and go away facing the blackboard and never turn around and things like that. Those are the bad teachers. But the actual teaching is an interactive exercise, and the level of interaction that this thing imposes right now has its constraints. There are boundary conditions. People can choose to interact with you. People can choose to shut themselves out by switching off their video. They can switch off their audio, etc. And you can't engage people in the same way as you can in class, right? And so that's that effect. So, but then you have to work out your way around it. The positive things, of course, is that this provides you with various dimensions of interactivity. And some of them were already mentioned. The fact that the people who are normally shy can talk in chat boxes, talk amongst each other. Actually, Zoom is probably not the best. There are other platforms in which crosstalk and talking in small groups, etc., are much better done than in Zoom. And these things are evolving, where the chatter in class can be a much better thing, and you can break them into small groups very easily and have people go and discuss things, come back, which is a clunky thing to do in class. This works much better for social sciences. In the sciences, it's very good. The other thing is, of course, as we are learning how to do written derivations on a tablet or on a board and stuff like that, going through, not everything works in PowerPoint that can be shared. That kind of stuff we are still learning. I'm sure better solutions will emerge. But people who are completely theoretical, who actually have to teach things that are very mathematical, very theoretical, very, very different. And from a teacher's point of view, the thing I really, really miss is that warm, the exchange between the student and the teacher, and the conviviality, and that is very, very difficult to reconstruct in here.
Okay. So Professor Menon, just to, instead of repeating the same question, just to make it a little more interesting, I'd add some more to this question. So let's say you're not going to the classroom, but then someone may be, on the normal days, they may be commuting for 3 hours a day. And sometimes they cannot catch up with the class. They would like a video recording of the class and they can watch it at their own time. So they don't have to commute. They can, sort of follow the teaching on their own pace. Isn't that better than missing a little bit of interaction with your students?
That will be fine from the point of view of a student. I can sort of speak for myself and what fun I have. And I think Somak really summarized it beautifully. I mean, the word performance is absolutely right, because it draws from the audience that you're seeing. And in that sense, that's hard to replicate in an online atmosphere. So when you're standing in front of a class of 100 students, and this interaction begins, and especially I like to teach without notes on the board with a chalk, sort of the traditional way to do it, because then that really, I have to organize the material in my head very clearly before I can do that. And I can figure out, are the students following me? Should I slow down? Where should I ask them a question? Did you get this? What happens if I do this? All of this is much easier done in that very personal format. I still haven't figured out the right way to replicate that in the online format. No doubt there are much better teachers than me who have a better idea of how to do it. I haven't figured this out yet. How do I get the feeling of the chalk in my hand, 9 o'clock in the morning, standing in front of a class, looking out at them? I still haven't been able to do that. And I think that is a part that I'm personally missing as a teacher. I don't know how it works for the students.
Okay. So Professor Bamba, I'd let you comment on this, but I'd also want you to add things in the line of, they are all talking about theater as if it is a performance, but a cinema is also a performance, right? But there is no audience there, but we have seen many good cinemas as much as we have seen many good theaters. So what's wrong with the movie?
So no, it's not the movie. There are some tricks you do when you're in the class, like you go and deliberately make a mistake on the board and you want the students to correct you. You can go on with that mistake. And that makes the student engaged, like, oh, you made a mistake. That shouldn't be a minus. That should be a plus. That type of thing I have not been able to do in Google Classroom. I can't make mistakes on the board so that the students catch on and engage in a, nice back and forth. I can't do things like, sometimes when I'm teaching quantum mechanics, I say, let's do tunneling, how strange tunneling is. And I go and I bang myself against the wall. And I say, quantum mechanically, I should be on the other side, and I can't do that. And so there are these theatrics that we use in order to engage the class. And those type of theatrics that, give engagement. And also my personality is tied up with the blackboard. I have this genetic, my dad, also, we have this genetic affection to chalk dust, and so we are always writing all over the place in the blackboard and covered with chalk dust. And it's sort of, and the students sort of, make us eccentric and like to come to our classes, because they have this, they have all this cinematic, or they have a drama going on as well as being taught. So engagement through this type of thing is not available online. On the other hand, I have come across now, my students, my grad students have come across conferences that they could never attend because they could never get the money. But now they have gone to Chicago, they have gone to Prague, they're going to Tokyo, and they're going to present their posters by avatars, and it's virtual reality. And they actually go in, they make an avatar of themselves, and I make an avatar of myself, and people go in and they are asked questions, and it's amazing. It's like being in Star Trek. So there are these amazing things. So there are different types of theatrics being invented in the pandemic, and they were there before, but being used much more in the pandemic. There are different types of engagements, and there are different types of engagement of actual classroom teaching. So, and together it would be nice, V. Balakrishnan and Lakshmi Bala in IIT Madras, their lectures, they give the lectures on the blackboard, but the lectures are recorded. And so they're excellent, because you have the theatrics of engagement with the class, and you also can, if you have to commute, you can always watch it at home also. So I think a nice happy medium would be a good future plan.
Yes, both will of course be better than any one.
Yeah.
And we can come back to this later, but just as a humorous point, I'd like to say that maybe at some point we'd say, I can believe I cannot, I'm teaching on Google and I can add all this computer graphics animation in how I'm walking around and so on. And
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that people used to teach in class one day without all these computer graphics helping me and so on. But coming to conferences, actually, that is one of the points that we'd like to discuss. And maybe we can discuss that now, since this has already been mentioned. As Professor Bamba mentioned, that you can actually attend many conferences now virtually. And talking about that, even Presision this year, there are international participants in Presision, which has never happened in the last 3 years. And just generally the number of participants, the quality of the research work they're presenting has been better. So that's definitely a point. So I am actually going to propose a more radical thing for the sake of the discussion, which is given how conferences are happening online, particularly with these avatars and sort of a real feel and so on, I still understand that there is a point of, talking to people over, in person and over coffee and so on. But shouldn't we completely stop conferences in person, given that that's immensely useful for environment, and also it is very much equality driven, because not again, caregivers cannot always attend conferences that others can. So should we go in for sort of a principle that we would not hold any conference offline? Who should we start with? So maybe who is more eager? So
I'm going to talk about this.
Yes, yes.
First of all, there is quite a lot of discussion. In fact, today, starting from yesterday, an article came out on the carbon footprint of the astronomer. If you've seen on social media, carbon footprint of an astronomer is apparently, somebody has worked out in Australia 9 times more than the average Australian. And that's because as astronomers, we travel quite a bit, not just to conferences, but everywhere, etc. And I must say that over the last few months, the greatest relief I've had in my life is not having to eat airline food and sleep on hotel beds, which I do for most of my life in the last few years. And this, I'm really relieved that I don't have to travel as much as I normally do to conferences. Having said that, you go to conferences, I already mentioned the aspect of serendipity, aspect of discovering what people do, and the serendipitous coming together of a group of people who start discussing something, and then papers evolve, work evolves. And I've had so many examples I can give from my career where ideas have come from meeting people at conferences. Conferences, I very rarely go and listen to the talks in the parallel sessions. I very rarely do. Even from the very early career, I decided conferences are the places where you go to meet people. And that is the social part of it is wonderful. And this is being enhanced, I think, quite a bit in these Zoom conferences. People can participate in conferences where they wouldn't, but of course the interaction is very different. So one of the things, Ritaban, I've seen even in the 3 months, it's evolved quite a bit. People have found new ways of doing these things. We did an Indo-French conference recently in which, even though it was Indo-French, people from all over the world took part. It was an astronomical spectroscopy. And normally we do every 2 years. We normally have 30 people. In this particular one, we had 100 people from all over the world. And we could break them up into, using Zoom's facilities, into small groups in between sessions so that people could have these addas, right? Little addas of 4 or 5 people. And we even had a conference dinner, even along time zones. We published a menu and everybody cooked the same thing. And we brought that plate and we had dinner and we had a glass of wine, etc. So these things we simulate and it's great fun. But I found that in this particular conference, which happened about a month and a half ago, that the kind of small group discussions that we could simulate seemed to work quite well. In particular, because there were some very interesting topics that already had come out of the talks, etc. So I think we might converge to an end where conferences can maybe be at the same level of in-person conferences. There are some conferences that should not happen at all in person. And I'm glad they're gone. And I hope they don't come back. These are conferences that are very well done on this medium. But I think the conferences which are heavy on socialization, I think still might happen. And maybe, we can't get the carbon footprint to 0, but maybe to a very small amount.
Okay. Further comments on abolishing conferences? Yes, no, Professor Bamba?
No, I think that we should have a happy medium, like the people who can afford to go and get funded, etc. Very nice. They should go to the conference, but we should still continue with the Zoom. We should still continue with the virtual reality for those who cannot afford to go. And so in that way, the conferences are inclusive. And also, I would like my graduate students to actually go to a conference sometime. I mean, right now, all they know is Zoom. And it's just a completely different thing. I mean, okay, Somak is, a seasoned person, and I'm old enough to have gone to 100 conferences. But, that the sort of camaraderie and the sort of connections you make by physically going to a conference and interacting with many people, especially the Trieste conferences. They're like that. You can make friends for life and you can have collaborations for life by actually, communicating over lunch, dinner, etc. So that is not there. Of course, I also went to a conference in which they posted a pasta recipe and we made the pasta and ate the pasta together. So things like that are there. But the thing about young people getting together in groups and solving problems, like the Trieste type conferences, a lot of very good work which has lasted for many years has come out of such interactions. So I think it should be a happy medium. Make the carbon footprint less, but but also allow people to have a social experience, a socio-educational experience. It's good for physics conferences to be like that. And as many people said, there is just nothing like actually one-on-one talking about your field, the type of enthusiasm you can generate. You still have napkins and write equations on napkins and those type of things you can't do on Zoom. So I would like both I'd like some happy medium. Yeah, like you said, reduce the carbon footprint, but not eliminate it altogether.
Okay. Professor Menon?
No, I can't improve on both those answers. I think the happy medium is really the right way to go. And the only sort of technical issue with this is that if you want to organize a conference that works across Japan time, India time, Europe time, and the US time, someone's going to have to wake up at 12 o'clock at night and set up. And with the full day's work before that, it's sort of hard to maintain the level of energy and connectedness if you have to know that from 12 in the morning to 4 in the morning, I'm not going to sleep. So these are things that we haven't figured out how to deal with. Maybe there's some pill that will help us to do that. But there are some practical issues. But I agree that the happy medium would be the best thing. Some level of physical interaction and definitely a level of reducing carbon footprints.
Right. So, I mean, if I give my small opinion on this by the virtue of being the moderator, is a lot of the things that I also agree that, in-person conversation is much better and so on, or, you are sort of walking around the conference room and you suddenly saw someone whom you know and you go to that part and so on. But all these things, I imagine all these things can be stimulated over
Virtual reality.
future Zoom. A future Zoom can have all these things, all these features. And then maybe what we are saying is based on our previous experience. But just as, when there are some people who will say, no, this is impossible and this doesn't work. No one will do it. And then they say, you are saying this because that's what you have been brought upon. You have been brought on this kind of notions, but your notions will completely change. So maybe with this bigger and better softwares for conferencing and so on, our notions of these will change. But right now, I completely agree that some personal interaction is important. On the other hand, as you say, I mean, many students also commented that, you can always have a real conference, but also, make it available online. That's true. But as soon as you are doing that, you are now giving non-equal footing to two kinds of people. Some people who can afford to join the conference are getting a little bit of advantage over those who cannot, which has been happening for a long time, of course. But I'm just saying that it's not here. This having both ways is not exactly the kind of good thing that we think they are. That's what I think. But okay, we have half an hour left, but I am sort of also repeating, sort of saying the questions from the chat box as well. So I'm hoping that there won't be too many questions left at the end of this. But let's move on to something that's one of the very negative situations of this pandemic. To me, I don't see any solution to this, and I wonder if I'd like to hear from you, which is about both laboratory courses as well as experimental physics research. What do you think is the situation there? Particularly, let's talk about research. Let's start with talking, because laboratory courses, at least there are ways to do some simulation, etc., and maybe get out of that. But experimental research, is it really affected as much as we think it is? And is there any way out? So let's start with Professor Menon.
Well, 100% it's affected. I mean, all of the experimentalist colleagues I know are having trouble. They can't get to their labs, or their students aren't there. People to provide support services in the lab are not there. So certainly that is a problem, and there's no way to imagine a solution for it until things return at some level to normal. As far as the syllabus is concerned, we've done some amount of shifting of lab courses between the next semester and the current semester, so that this semester is theory heavy, the next semester is experiment heavy. Hopefully with the idea that by January, we can allow some students to come back to work. But it's absolutely true that the bulk of the difficulties associated with the pandemic will be on experimentalists. Theorists are relatively less affected. And that's something we don't know how to solve.
Cannot people work with maintaining social distancing in the lab? Is that impossible?
No, that's possible. So with masks, etc., it can be done. Certainly, it's possible, but sort of it may be possible at some reduced strength. You divide all numbers by 3 or something, and then get people back to work. Right. But it's not an ideal situation.
Okay, comments, Professor Raychaudhury?
Yeah, so Ritaban, I'll tell you what we did here, for example, and I see that happening in the larger institutions near me, ISEF Pune, things like that as well. In Ayuka, we shut down completely. Of course, Pune is very, very badly affected. Gautam knows more than I do how badly affected Pune has been. And the problem with labs is that it's not just the people working in the labs, but the supply chain. Things come in from outside. You get all the raw materials, little things that come and stuff like that. You need people to fix things. Something goes wrong. You need a repairman to come in. And we ran into those problems immediately. What we did was we've had our labs and our computer center running all through the shutdown period. At a low efficiency, of course, but no activity has stopped because we've had deliverables, etc., to do. ISRO never stopped. We had to deliver our camera, suit camera for the Aditya mission, etc. So, but we made sure that we had very strict notions of who could, and people who lived on campus could come in at different hours. There was not more than 2 people in the same room or 1 person in the same room, and sanitization in between people's occupations. So I would have one person come and sanitize all the tables before somebody else comes in, etc. And it has worked. We have not had a single case in our labs where somebody's actually turned up positive. In fact, we had one person who was positive who'd come into the lab, but did not infect anybody else. So I think there are ways this can happen. It increases the stress on the lab system in a huge manner. In particular, I talked to, for example, the director of Arakat Indore, where he's a huge accelerator there, of course. And then there were big instruments, etc., which have to be kept running. You can't shut them because there are if you shut them, then running it is very difficult, etc. And there's liquid nitrogen going in and all kinds of things. So they had a rota of people, very reduced rota of people doing this. So no doubt that experimental research has been affected, but we are learning ways of coping with it. If we have to live with it for very long, then we'll work out ways of doing it. But it just put a huge amount of stress on the system. I want to say a very quick thing about teaching labs. And teaching labs, I found that there is a negative thing and there's a positive thing. The negative thing is, of course, people had to move towards demonstrations rather than touching the stuff. But if you think about how undergraduate labs work, unfortunately, in school labs and undergraduate labs, it actually is a demonstration. You don't really do much innovative playing around with the instruments in your lab. It's somebody does it and you watch it, or you try to do something and then watch somebody else do it very, very well and things like that. Unfortunately, that's how a lab works. And that is why translating that into this kind of a format where, as Professor Bamba said, somebody comes and as a research student demonstrating how this is done has not affected. What I found has been very good is that you can turn a physics experiment online into people thinking about the issues much better, the statistical issues, the errors, what could go wrong, why is it happening. In a particular lab, the emphasis is not on that. It's getting through the performance of something, repeating that somebody's done before. Whereas here, you have the opportunity of turning it around and saying, I've done this experiment in front of you. Now you think about how this is working, what could go wrong, what are the errors. And I think that can be given a positive spin. If you can do it properly, you can work out many of these experiments online and teach the student much more about experimentation than they can learn in the lab.
Okay, thank you. So Professor Bamba, you can comment on this, but another student ask again that clever that clever question. So I'd like to also you can cover that as well, which is he said that people who work with deadly viruses and bacteria, etc., they have been working with all sorts of protection for a long time now. So why can't everyone in labs work like that?
Well, it turns out that actually my son is an experimentalist and he has been working in the lab by wearing one of those plexiglass things and then they have these staggered hours, so that and our university started staggering hours for experimentalists last week. But what happened is my experimental colleague, the solid state experimental colleague, who actually has to go and handle equipment, not like me who sees in Fermilab, he said that as soon as he went into the lab and turned on the equipment, all the UPSs were dead. Okay, and he now he's too scared to get a man to come and fix the UPS. Okay, so I mean, he got the opportunity to go into the lab. His student got the opportunity to go to the lab, but they cannot do anything now because it's been lying unused for such a long time that the equipment is dead. So now they'll have to. But they are saying that they cannot stop anymore. They will wear plexiglass shields, masks. You know, those the type you wear on the airplane, and gloves. And have one student at one time, and they will do it. And the other people who are being affected are our MSc project students now. All of them had more than 50% opted for experimental project. Okay, which means actually doing something, not just analyzing data. I mean, the reason they took the project is so that they can actually build something. But now they'll be doing just basically the demonstration type of thing. So they won't get the same enjoyment out of the project and the same learning out of the project that they would have when they went into lab. So we forget that there are these MSc students who every university now, the last semester is a project, and now the project students, most of them are compelled to do theory. A lot of them who don't really want to do theory. And the ones who want to do experiment, their advisors are trying to find ways in which the project will be meaningful to the student and to them. So this is this is an area which requires a lot more consideration. And I think that the person who's clever is clever in the right way. I mean that, somehow we have to equip ourselves to be, basically go in hazmat suits.
It's difficult. It's difficult to work that way, and so I guess that will have some negative impact.
I'll give you an example. Give me half a minute, Ritaban.
Yes.
A very good example of LIGO India. So here we are gearing up towards building LIGO India, as you know. So one of the things that we had planned for this year was that between the two runs of LIGO India, 03 and 04, there would be a one-year shutdown. And that's when they open up all the tunnels and the vacuum, etc. And because we are building a team of young people here who are going to, in the first instance, start putting things together here in India for LIGO India, we would send members of this team up there to Hanford and Livingston so they can go into the tunnels and look at what's being done, because things are being fixed, things are being repaired, measurements are being made, calibrations are being made, etc. Now everything is going to stop. They can't fly. And at least till January, February, or even later, I can't send anybody because, of course, they can't go. So what we are trying to do is to, in the US, the police have body cameras. So I'm having people who are, and they've started already the work there. In Hanford and Livingston, they've started the work. I'm having people wear the hazmat suits with body cameras.
Oh my God.
And go in and various cameras in there. And our team sitting here watching what's happening in the middle of the night. And so I mean, this is a nightmare. But this is the best you can do. But it's some communication will develop, and these guys are talking to themselves as they're fixing things. And if, for example, there is an electronic element that they need to take out, they're shining a light on it. This is, but maybe in a future universe, when we send people to Mars and they fix something there, we'll have to do it that way. But we are learning new ways of doing this kind of experimentation. But we are surviving. But this is the bit that's going to be the most affected now in this.
Okay. So we have less than half an hour now, so we'll move on to. I had one or two more questions for you, but I'll come back to them later if we have time. for now, we'll open up the floor for questions. And so I will request the participants to write the questions in chat box or raise their hand, and then then they can ask questions directly. While they're doing that, let me go to one question that our student Pratyushavo Boral has asked, and I think that's a very relevant question. The question is, given that the pandemic had a tremendous negative effect on economy, funding for large scientific projects will probably be affected. So that may make people more inclined towards small science or theoretical science which do not require much funding. How shall that affect physics in the post-COVID era? So who is more eager to answer this? Will science fundamentally change because of economic effects immediately after COVID? Professor Menon?
I wouldn't sort of worry too much about a shift between big science and small science. I think we do need more small science in this country. We need more, for example, soft matter physics, which is cheap, easy to do. You can do it in an undergraduate lab, and you can submit papers to Nature and Science with that, which you can't say about pretty much any other type of physics where you need ultra low temperatures, very expensive equipment, etc., etc. So there's certain categories of science that we have traditionally back, and more people start to do them, and we maintain the right. That's a bad idea in itself. And as far as I can see, and again, I think Somak could probably have a better idea what the larger landscape of this is. I think there will be an effect on funding altogether, and how much of it will fall on big projects and how much of it will fall on basically science as a whole, on more expensive parts of science. Biology is a very expensive science. If you want to get some small, really micro quantities of a particular chemical or reactant, you have to spend large sums of money for that. It's very expensive to do. So it's not just physics, but all of science will be affected by cutbacks in money, and we don't know where that will go yet. And my guess is that there will be severe cutbacks.
Okay. Professor Bamba, do you think the next bigger and better LHC will now not be made?
No, because, I completely disagree with, I don't disagree with Gautam, but I disagree with the fact that funding for big science should stop, because why are we on Zoom? We are on Zoom because the World Wide Web was invented by particle physicists to communicate with each other. If you want innovation, and always major world events, they lead to innovative science, okay? And the public, and also I think now public-private partnerships are going to increase. There's going to be now a lot more private funding of science. We rely too much on government funding of science, but now we have to make, now we have 8th richest person in the world. We have to make him contribute to science. Okay, and maybe now that he has seen what is happening, instead of buying Amazon, he might just contribute to science, because he wouldn't have been able to have Amazon if it wasn't for particle physicists at CERN. Okay.
Also, he's earned a lot of money in the pandemic by delivering food.
Yeah, exactly. And what about geo connection and stuff like that? So I think private, already Gautam is getting a private money. And I think, on the one hand, remember World War II also gave rise to Keynesian economics. You create jobs, but you'll create a different type of job. You'll create jobs to make online interaction better, communication better, in large collaboration, and you'll have more global efforts now. So I don't really think that I am a supporter of small science, because that is very important, but I'm also a big supporter of big science, because I think it leads to innovation, and I think that the innovation lasts much longer than and gives you a lot more money back than the money you put in.
Okay, so Suchetana has a question for a long time, so please unmute and ask your question.
No, I don't think I have a question. I actually had multiple comments, so but maybe I'll just make
yes.
Yeah, I'll just make one or two. So the first thing is about this this live teaching, because I completely agree with all the panelists that teaching definitely for me is a performance. I actually practice the thing the day before I go to the class. So it's definitely, and even the jokes are sometimes scripted. That okay, I'm gonna tell that joke after that thing, and that's why I don't,
You're giving
so
all
that,
our secrets away.
All your
yes, and yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think students are smart. We think them that they're naive, but they understand. Anyway, so what I feel is that right at this point, the way we are doing this online teaching and all that, all these things are missing. Like, the one-to-one interaction. I cannot see the faces of the students. I mean, I ask a question, did it make sense? I don't know what they're doing. I mean, all these things are, I think, happening right now. But if this progresses, it is my understanding that we will have fantastic software, like in my bedroom or in my study room, I can create a virtual classroom. So I'd be able to see the student's face. It will be like there will be this in my wall, there will be this virtual classroom environment. I'm sure this kind of software are not that far along. But still, what I felt that even if we have the best of softwares and internet connections, and every student has access to all of these, there are two things that I particularly feel are still something that bothers me, and I'm sure a lot of others also. The first is that we are talking about equity in terms of digital access. Let's say we make that equal, but what about the other kind of equities? I mean, sorry, disparities. For example, this is worldwide seen that there are students who come from diverse economic backgrounds. Some have probably doesn't even have, they have four siblings, and they're probably living with their grandparents, and they don't even have that much of a private space in their house. Whereas, for others, it's not a problem. So that I have heard from like all corners of the world. Many of my colleagues reported this thing that the classroom actually erases this division and sort of makes everybody come to the same intellectual space where you can do interactions freely, rather than people staying in different. I mean, it's good in a way that you don't have to commute and all that, but I think that's I feel a very important aspect of a classroom, because it provides a unique and similar level space to everybody, and they can do intellectual interaction there. That I felt one thing. The other thing is, of course, about this personality that many of the panelists mentioned, that even if I have a virtual classroom, I can just give a live talk there. But probably, when I interact with students, a lot of them are influenced by also our personalities. Like, and that I'm not sure that by looking constantly at a screen and not interacting at a one-to-one like human interaction level, is it possible to sort of, because I learned from my mentors not just physics, not just their way of thinking, but also their personalities kind of attract them. I'm not sure that how much that we will be able to sort of transmit through online. These two things bother me, but other parts, I think probably we will have answers in the future. Was my first comment, but I'll stop here, and I'll just let others discuss, and maybe they can give some feedback to me on what I told. But yeah,
Okay.
I'll stop here.
Shogato Borat, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello. As has been discussed at length here today, that due to this COVID-19 lockdown, several doors have been opened. In my evaluation process, we had to undergo extensive long-term evaluations, and we had to innovate and work on projects, and we were evaluated based on that, which were good. I felt that it helped in understanding of the subject. So my question is, someday, which hopefully would be soon, we are going to go back to classrooms. So what are the things which we have learned during this lockdown, which we are going to keep in future, and what are the things that we are going to discard?
Okay. So anyone wants to take up that? So Shogata, are you asking regarding something specific or in general about?
No.
I think I'm asking in general that what are the good things that we are going to keep with us in future, and what are the things which we are not going to keep and go back to the old ways which we used to do.
I think we already discussed that
Discuss
one of the
this.
things that we are going to keep is certainly this format of seminars and colloquia and conferences, which have worked very, very well, I think. And this is going to get embellished. For me, I'm certainly going to have small group interactions for both research and teaching. We will do at least part of it, or if not whole of it, on this format. I mean, a lot of tutorial discussions with research students, and stuff like that. I have to say something. I mean, one of the major features of my life has been, for the last 5 years as a director, has been to go to a meeting for 1 hour in Delhi at the ministry and spending 2 days or 3 days doing this, because you fly, you stay in a hotel, you do other things, and that 1 hour meeting, and then you take another flight and come back and stuff like that. And that is part, and it easily could have been done in this format, that meeting. And we do this every week, maybe twice a month, thrice a month, etc. And now a great thing has happened, and is that this couldn't be done 2-3 years ago, because the people who are in power, who are typically the aged people, had no way of learning how to do this kind of thing. And now everybody does it. I'm speaking to ministers on Zoom, on Google Classroom and stuff like that. And they're giving webinars and stuff like that. So clearly that is irreversible, I hope. So certainly format of interaction, many things we will discuss and find out that these interactions are best done online, and we'll keep them. And on that scale, the worst thing I would say is essentially counseling and assessment. That kind of stuff cannot be done in this format very well. And from each education institution, there's a lot of mentoring and counseling that happens, which I think has suffered a lot, and people are there is quite a lot of problems that we cannot face over this kind of. So for me, I think these are the two kind of extremes of what I'll keep and what I won't keep.
Okay, Shagnik has a question, but before I go to Shagnik, I'll just sort of mention comments by a couple of students. Ognivo Datto, who is an organizer of Presision, said that regarding online, offline conferences, if you take Presision, for example, we have been able to do with a budget an order of magnitude less than the previous offline ventures.
No,
and yet the talks have been fantastic and so on. So that has happened. Have we lost Gautam? By the
I'm
way?
here. I'm here.
Okay,
I'm here.
okay,
I'm
okay.
here.
No biryani, no.
And the other comment that I had, that I received, was from our former student Annesh Mojumdar. He said that this has been already discussed, that education is not just about learning a subject and solving some problems. It's about overall growth in their character development and way of thinking. So this is very hard to do in an online environment. Innovation comes when you are inspired by the ideas and motivations of others around you and discussions with them. This makes you not only a better student, but a better human being, which is absolutely, I think we all agree with that, that in terms of imparting just the knowledge, online medium may be just enough or slightly less than enough, but in terms of making good citizens, online medium is not really ideal. Okay, so while I read some other comments, I'll let Shagnik ask the next question. Shagnik, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ritaban sir. So thank you for this wonderful panel discussion. I would like to point out one thing as an advantage, which I have particularly got, which was I could actually, due to the lockdown and everything, I could actually install a software within 15 to 20 minutes and observe using lick firsthand for an entire night sitting on my bed. So that's, I think, a good point there. But my question is rather from a transitioning student point of view, that I think the lockdown has also affected students who are just passing out and moving to some other courses or any other jobs or stuff like that. And like, since in India, a lot of these things depend on exams, like these mass exams like JEE and NEET. Like, what to do right now? Like, do we need to conduct those exams anyway, or how do we cope up with admissions this year? And even like graduate school in India depend on those kind of exams. So what to do about that?
Well, the court has told us that we have to take do the exam, So we have no choice. I don't agree one bit with what the court says, but I'm not going. That's not contempt, I hope. But anyway,
this is being recorded. It will get
It's online.
the ethics of this, I don't know. But the court has said we are to do it, so I guess we are bound to do it. Unfortunately, even though we don't agree, and it's very difficult these days not to agree with the court also. No? So.
In slightly related context, Suchetana says that we should, one of the things that we should take away from the COVID, post-COVID situation is that we should get rid of big exams and sort of change the notion of exams and make the exams more, less general and more class specific and more so that you can sort of customize your exam based on the mode of exam that you are using.
I hope Suchetana becomes a member of the UGC.
exactly.
We all want that.
Yeah.
We all want that.
Ritaban, can I just make a comment about the assessment that we were talking?
Yes, sure.
So I think long back. I think this is related. So I'll make a quick comment because there are many others. I think for me, the online mode of teaching I had difficulty in the teaching process because I did not want to talk to this computer. It was very boring, talking about atomic molecular physics to a computer screen. But what I really enjoyed is the exams because I could now give them, because now I could give them exams like this that, you learned this theoretical thing in class. Go and write a code and simulate this. Or for somebody else, go to that website and do this simulated experiment and explain that what you learn in class. And I mean the exam, and also we could give like very exciting projects, but this is much better done when we have a small class. If it's a very big class, all these things are not possible. But luckily I was teaching 2 specialized course classes and we could actually design fantastic exams. And I think when I read the feedback from students, they were so happy because our exams got many times more creative than what we would have other, like a 2-hour sit down, do some things and memorize. Not always memorizing, but it's 2-hour time bound exam. And rather than that, we could do. And particularly, I must mention that in one course, Astrophysics Lab, which I was teaching with my colleague Shomodip Shamoy, who was here, we actually gave projects to individual students, and like 5-6 projects came from there, which were of like top-notch class. We could have never imagined those projects that students designed. So I think what I feel is that there must be some introspection of how we do assessment of our students and how examination should be done from like basic school level to, for example, entry into graduate school.
It requires a lot of work. That's the main thing. I think I completely agree with you, but it requires a lot of work to do this kind of thing. I mean, a lot of our exams are very easy to do and by default and recycled and all kinds of stuff, right? And so many exams and assessments we have to do, how they are produced. And to go into a completely different paradigm will require quite a lot. It's not impossible, but will require quite a lot of effort. And who's going to give that effort is the question. Over the short term. Long term, this will happen.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes now. So I think I will, I'll like to end with asking you one question.
So I'm
So I'll ask the question and you can think about the answer. And in the meantime, I'll say, okay. So actually, I have one more question from a student. So I'll say that and then I'll do that. So the question is, in the online mode, a teacher can easily teach 200 students instead of 50 students. So will that lead to unemployment for teachers?
I don't think so. I think teachers will be okay.
It's not the same. Teaching a 50 student class online and teaching a 200 student class, it's not the same. Because often in online mode, we are giving customized exams, we are managing the whole thing. So it's actually not too much easier. I mean, yes, the classroom is much bigger, I agree. But that can be done even in real universities with larger classrooms. But I mean, in presidency, we teach these generic elective classes which may have 100 students, but it's not the same. But if you have anything to add, please go ahead. And
maybe we can have more variety, more courses. I mean, for example, our summer school here in Ayuka, the introductory summer school, each year we get 1,200 to 1,500 applications, and we choose 50 people because our guest house is limited, and they come and attend. This year we opened it up to all 1,200, right? And everybody attended. We had about 600 to 800 people attend all the classes. So that opens it up. I think it was fantastic. And we even had an optional exams at the end, assessments and stuff like that. I think what will happen is that if, for example, we can open up these courses for people, then there are other people who can teach other courses. And that is also the way the CBCS and the new education policy is moving, to give people more choice. In the current setting, with the limited number of teachers, giving that kind of choice was absolutely impossible. Now you can.
That is true.
okay, yeah.
And also, I feel that now we're getting a generation of students who are used to learning online, and they are going to be the next generation of undergraduates. So they will be more comfortable with having a combination of online and actual one-to-one teaching. And also there are these GREs and SATs exams have been carried out online for a long time, so we can probably try and do JEE and all that if we really want to do exams in that same format. So the thing is that we require dedicated teachers, and the more dedicated teachers we have, the better it is. And I think now maybe teaching will acquire a better status as a profession, especially school teaching, which was considered not such a great profession for people. Now people will start having, now even the Ambanis and others might start feeling that this profession is very noble and also very essential. It's an essential service now, school teaching. So I think in that way, some pride may be restored to the teaching community through the fact that this type of innovation, that even through a pandemic, we were able to educate our children because of dedicated teachers.
Okay, so I think I will, there are some other comments that I would like to mention. One is that Anumitra Das says that while during online classes, sometimes students are harassing the not so tech savvy professors anonymously, and how will that affect teacher-student relation? I think I will answer that question. I mean, don't harass anyone. Okay, I mean, don't harass your fellow classmates. Don't harass your teachers. Just be cooperative and kind to each other. I mean, that's all we have to say. Okay, so I think I will, okay, so Ognivo Datta also asked that if we have more customized exams, that is possible for a small class, but what about universities that have many colleges under it, and there are many students who will be taking the same sort of standard exam, like Calcutta University have hundreds of colleges with it. So in those cases, how will a customized exam work?
Just like the GRE, I mean, so many people take the GRE, right?
No,
And it's
but
online.
yes, you mean online. You are
Yeah.
saying that the whole exam should be
No,
online.
but I mean, the thing is, the JEE, for example, the IIT joint entrance, is also held like the GRE online. But the problem is the reason this movement is going on outside is that it is online, but you still have to go to an exam
The
center.
center, yeah.
Right? Because there has to be invigilation so that you're not doing it with the help of other people. That is the problem. And so we have to figure out a way of doing things online, which can be somehow invigilated or time bound or stuff like that. That's the point. And
So I think
that
it comes back, yeah, that comes back to the issue that the primary difficulty seems to be evaluation.
Yeah.
It's not so much the teaching, but how do you evaluate in a consistent and correct manner?
Okay. So Suchetana says as a response that we should not have affiliated colleges. All colleges should be autonomous.
Yeah, but that's what the NEP
That's what the NEP says. That's what the NEP also
Of
says.
the Human Resource Development Ministry now.
So
well, Pune University, by the way, has 470 colleges. It's 4 times Calcutta. Yeah, so
wow.
it's mind-boggling. The numbers are mind-boggling.
Okay, so the last question from a student, and before they are asking many questions now as opposed to before. So one is, I think Professor Bamba already discussed a little bit of that, which is during the pandemic, when the classes are closed, etc. We felt demotivated. So if there is any suggestion about how to cope with this kind of demotivation because of a lack of routine and lack of regular activities, lack of classes, etc. Do you have any?
I'm actually seeing students who are far more motivated because they've been stuck at home doing nothing for the past 7 months. So they just really want to work very hard. They really want to study. I think motivation levels now among the students I see are much higher than I've seen them in the past. So I think that's a good thing. I hope it will sustain.
In University of Hyderabad, we have created a mentor system. So each faculty has a few students that they can talk to about when they're depressed or undermotivated. So I think that a mentor system is good, and so students, a small bunch, 3 or 4 students are assigned to one teacher, and the teacher can then, I mean, they can have some session with the teacher about how to motivate themselves. So mentorship programs are a good idea in this case.
Okay. So there has been a comment which actually is related to one of the points that I originally wrote, but we could not discuss. So I'm just mentioning that comment, which is the physics GRE has been cancelled this year. The general GRE hasn't been cancelled, but the physics GRE has been. So, I mean, that's not such a big problem because many US departments were not using physics GRE in the last few years. But my general question about this was, this pandemic and travel restrictions, in the long run, will that hurt the sort of the international nature of the physics community, maybe in India and also in Western Europe and North America, where it's very international? Do you think that will have any long-term effect on the nature of the internationality?
You mean more than the way Donald Trump is hurting it?
Exactly.
No, I'm not so worried about that. I'm more worried about something that you'd actually had in your original list of questions, and that is early career researchers. I mean, this is, for example, somebody who's finishing their PhDs now. They are looking for their first postdocs. Where do they go? People, international travel is stopped. Typically they would go abroad to do a postdoc or an internship if they're in the final years and things like that. Those things are will for a while be difficult, and for a while people would be reluctant. I mean, universities would be reluctant to take students and postdocs, etc., from outside their system, and that is going to have a long-lasting impact on, I think. Student admissions have fallen, no doubt. I mean, I saw the figures only recently. In any case, the number of foreign students in the US, in particular Chinese students, has been going down for a long time. Trump had an effect from the time that came in, and then the pandemic has had. That will fluctuate, I think. And this year, the numbers have fallen by a very small percent, like 10-20%, I think, enrollment of foreign students in American universities in sciences. What has happened is that people have been enrolled, and then they're going to attend the first semester online, and then they'll go, stuff like that. And the visas are not being issued and things. What will happen in the unorganized sector is my main issue. And also the other thing is young career researchers have to publish papers. This pandemic has been very unkind to them in general for their research time and dividing time between family time and research time and stuff like that. So I think for young people, it's going to have a huge effect.
Okay.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Gautam, isn't the vaccine coming? Because
yes,
if the vaccine comes, then my students who have already got, who have to go to Fermilab can go, and so many things can happen. So Gautam, when's the vaccine coming?
It's not going to come in a hurry, Bindu. I wish I had better news for you. But
I'm
if you're
talking
really
almost
lucky,
here, the Russian vaccine, something,
no, I have no good news for you, unfortunately.
Okay, so we're out of time.
Go back briefly to what Somak said?
Yes, please.
I think that's a very important point. The point that the people who will struggle over the next year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, will be young faculty, postdocs, beginning students. Remember that the pandemic hit us at a time when the whole world economy was doing badly, and coupled to completely irrational acts by the UK government, by the American government, which sort of didn't make sense in any larger. And the Indian economy was doing particularly badly. So all of this is like a perfect storm of many things happening at the same time. So in this broader context, where will science funding go? Where will the jobs be for young people? Is a big question. And I really agree with Somak that this is going to be probably the most important question of the next few years at least.
Okay, so we are out of time. So I'll end with one final question. I already asked this to the participants here, and I'll read out some of the answers. But the question is, in March 2020 or 20th March 2020, if you knew that there will be a lockdown for the next 6 months, what would you have done differently? So while you think about this answer, some of the answers that have been given by other people, one person, Kaustubh Chakraborty, has said that I think from sort of an educator's point of view, that I would take a survey about the availability of gadgets and broadband and would have taken decision based on that, whether to provide the students some gadgets, would have requested the administration to create a television channel, would have requested universities to make their online courses available for everyone, would have done assessments continuously and project-based. Someone has said who actually live in a hostel near Presidency, but actually his home is farther away. He said, I would have packed my bag more seriously.
Yeah.
And then there is, I think I saw some other answers.
I would have cut my hair. I mean, I got my first haircut in 9 months this morning.
Exactly.
Cut myself.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, a lot of, in fact, we had a few students here who left in a hurry and then later on wanted to come back because they had not taken everything with them. And they said, I can't, they made the wrong choices of what to take.
Right.
So pack my bags is a very, very important point.
Right. Okay, Professor Bamba, any comment on that? Any answer?
In this hypothetical situation, I really don't know. I would have sort of organized my life better. I would have I would have taken all the software I have on my computer at work and put it on a hard drive and brought it home, which I couldn't do. And I would have uh, I would have just organized my life better and tried to. In the beginning, I had a complete mental breakdown. Really, I was very depressed. But then I got out of it. But I think that my life was disorganized, and I didn't bother about compartmentalizing my life and making it organized. And I would have, if I'd known that this pandemic was going to come, I would have tried to be more organized. And also I would have given my students a lot more um, monetary support for buying things, so that they could cope with the pandemic. I'm trying to do that now, but it's not enough. It's not enough. I would have asked the university to put aside a rainy day fund for such situations, for disaster situations, which they don't have. I mean, there's so much paperwork to even get 1,000 rupees out of the university. And I would have liked the administration to be less bureaucratic. And I would have told them, tried to make it.
I think nobody suffered more than Gautam, maybe, in this sudden lockdown, no?
I mean, so okay, I have a very different answer from that. And I think that I'm not sure what planning one can do for really unexpected sort of life circumstances. Who knew that it's going to be a 6-month lockdown at any point of time? I think we all come up with our own clever jugaad solutions for whatever it is. And in the process of coping with day-to-day life, figuring out what the needs are now, yesterday, tomorrow, etc., we come up with our own unique solutions. What works in the University of Hyderabad will not work in Ayuka, will not work in Ashoka. All of these have to be local solutions. The only generic point, I think, is the important one that Bindu made. Can we make our institutions more responsive and faster? And that's a very general point. So whatever you ask them, there will be people to listen to you and say, yes, they can do this by tomorrow. It's important what you say. But that's a sort of background to this more general thing. So my answer would be, I actually don't think we could have prepared. It's probably better to sort of live as we have done, try to find our own local solutions and hope that the institutions that support us are at least nimble enough to keep up with us.
Right. Okay, so I think we are say 6:14 now, so I don't want to keep the panelists or the other participants here. So I'll just do a one-line summary of what we discussed, but I don't want to do a long summary because we have all heard the discussion. And thank you very much, all of you, for this wonderful discussion. We sort of could do a lot of introspection and do a lot of sort of collective thinking about this, and that always helps. I hope the participants also got something out of this. I think, I mean, a very brief summary of the discussion in my mind that I'll take away from this is, yes, we are facing a lot of problems, we are seeing a lot of suffering, and that is itself a very bad thing for us, just by, at the face of all these problems. But on the other hand, we are also seeing a lot of innovations, a lot of changes of attitude, both from ourselves and from our colleagues everywhere. Things that wouldn't have been done in maybe the next 10 years is being done in 10 months or 10 days in some cases. So it's better to concentrate as the physics community. It's better to concentrate on these kind of sort of change of attitude, positive changes of attitude and innovations. And I think that will sort of that's what I take away from our discussion today. Okay, thank you very much. And again, I thank you on behalf of the Physics Department of Presidency University, and particularly the students who are the organizers. And I thank the students for giving me the opportunity to interact with all of you. And I think good night.
Thanks very much. And
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody.
Very much.
And
so long.
thank you, everybody. And tomorrow we are at the last day of the conference, and we will be resuming for the undergraduate conference talks at 11 in the morning. So I hope to see you all there again.
Thanks, Shaggy. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. That was so
Thank
nice.
you.